Today I am here with Wally Lewis, Channel 9 sports reporter and an all-time rugby league hero and legend. Today I'm going to have a little chat with him about his experiences both on and off the rugby league field. So thanks for meeting me today, Wally. I was wondering if we could start this interview by having a chat to you about your family. Is this okay?
That's fine.
You have 3 children who have grown up to be successful in their chosen fields. Can you share with us about what they are doing now and maybe a little bit about how they got to where they are today?
My oldest son Mitchell, he's 25. He works for a Brisbane radio station, Nova FM. He's been with him for 4 years now. It's always been a bit of a dream of his to be involved in the media, whether it was television or radio. But he was offered the chance to cover sport for Nova, and he enjoys doing that, and I catch up with him a fair bit while he's doing it with radio and I'm doing it for Channel 9. My second son Lincoln, he's an actor. He's been involved in Home and Away, and last year he was in a movie called Tomorrow When the War Began, which sold very well throughout the country. He enjoys acting, but unfortunately is based in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever he's filming for the last couple of months. Link's 23, and I've got a daughter, Jamie Lee, who's just turned 21. She's profoundly deaf, but she's never let that interfere with her, as everybody will understand. You take on one of the greatest challenges in life with a disability, but it's always fun to overcome that. She's done extremely well for herself. She's represented Australia for the last 5 years in water polo at varying standards, underage and also senior grade. And she's become the first deaf person to ever represent Australia in a hearing sport, so I'm very proud of her.
What such diverse careers. Teenagers these days might struggle with what they are going to do when they finish their schooling and what life may hold for them. What kind of advice can you give kids about to leave school?
One of the most important things is to have a plan in place. If you don't exactly know where you're going or have no idea for the future, it's very difficult to become fairly determined in your push for employment. So during the last year of high school in particular, it's extremely important that you go ahead with those plans. If you manage to achieve such success in finding that job, well, then you can be a lot happier. But if you can't, then it becomes a little bit difficult. There are always many options available, and those teenagers have got to be realistic. Maybe a little disappointed if they can't achieve that success the first time round, but always remain focused and very well planned as to what you'd like to achieve.
Been involved in football most of your life. If you did not excel in this in school, what do you think you might have been doing as a career? What else interested you in high school?
In primary school there wasn't too much else that excited me except sport. If it wasn't football, it was going to be cricket. But when I went to high school, there was also, I had an occupational interest being involved in physical education. So I guess most of it had to do with sport, being involved in sport, and being able to be in the health and fitness side of life. Had I not been involved in sport at any stage throughout my career, I don't know whether I would have got a job, to be honest, because such was such was my interest in sport that I didn't spend too much time studying anything else, much to the displeasure of my parents.
Been involved in football most of your life. If you did not excel in this in school, what do you think you might have been doing as a career? What else interested you in high school?
In primary school there wasn't too much else that excited me except sport. If it wasn't football, it was going to be cricket. But when I went to high school, there was also I had an occupational interest and being involved in physical education. So I guess most of it had to do with sport, being involved in sport, and being able to be in the health and fitness side of life. Had I not been involved in sport at any stage throughout my career, I don't know whether I would have got a job, to be honest, because such was my interest in sport that I didn't spend too much time studying anything else, much to the displeasure of my parents.
Outside of football, what has been the most successful thing that you have accomplished to date? Outside of football, what has been the most successful thing that you have accomplished to date?
It probably has to do with a little bit of a condition that I had myself in overcoming epilepsy. I dealt with that from when I was 21 years of age until I was 46, 47, before I unfortunately had an on-air seizure and had to deal with it. So I had an operation to remove a piece of my brain, which was 5 centimetres long by 3 centimetres wide by 2 centimetres deep. And fortunately, the opportunity was there to get rid of it and overcome the illness. And it's been 4 years now since I've had a bit of a problem with it. So it's been successful, and I'm enjoying life all over again.
I have had many mentors, support and belief from people over the years. These people have supported me to achieve what many may have seen as impossible. I would now like to touch on the subject of disability. I was born with cerebral palsy and will have it for the rest of my life. I define a disability as simply something we cannot do. Basically for me that means I cannot walk or talk in the same manner as other people. If this definition is a fair one, it means basically we all have a disability. Wally, I know disability has affected your family as well as you personally. Can you please share with me what you think a disability is and how it has affected your family?
A disability is something which restricts the opportunity for a person in life, makes it difficult in many ways, shapes and forms, but there is a varying level or condition of these problems along the way. One thing that disabilities cannot overcome, though, is a person's desire to communicate or be involved in enjoying life all over again. I think we all do that. Some of us enjoy it a little bit more than others, but the restrictions that may be produced throughout a person's life come along many varying levels and disappointments. Fortunately, though, I think most of us all have the same end result or goal in mind, and that is to enjoy life, to have fun, and enjoy the company of our family along the way.
Your daughter was given a cochlear implant in 2006. How did her life change after receiving this, and how has her disability affected her in the past or even present?
Yeah, well, my daughter was born in 1990. 12 months later, in 1991, we found out she was profoundly deaf. The biggest decision for us to make then was which path do we follow. We were advised by several different agencies on what we should do. The deaf community believed that we should just leave her alone, and they tagged her one of the lucky people in the world that didn't have to listen to sound. But we were much more determined to ensure that she could have the same opportunity to communicate with everybody that she wished to in the world. She had the cochlear implant. And that was done way back in 1994, when the end of 1994, early 1995, when she had the operation, and she's had that implant now for 16 and a bit years. So the bonuses for her have been that she is able to communicate quite easily. We are just like every other parent in the street now. When we see her, she goes off to go to water polo training, and the benefits that she's received from the cochlear implant have been quite obvious, because when she returns home from water polo training at about 10:30 at night, she's got the damn stereo in the car pumping out from about 3 blocks away, and you can hear the music just pumping, and boom, boom, when she turns up, she'll pull into the driveway, and then she, of course, comes in through the front door, sees her mother and me talking to her and just saying, "Turn that damn music down, we can hear it." And while there might be a few people that are disappointed with the volume, the sound that's coming through, we're overjoyed at the same time that she's got the same opportunity in life that we have, and that's to appreciate sound.
You have used these experiences to become a patron for the Hear and Say Centre, and also educating people on epilepsy. What is your roles with these organisations, and how do they help people understand their respective disabilities?
Well, originally my role with the Hear and Say Centre, it started before it was actually named. I was trying to get the best possible assistance for Jamie Lee, but was basically told there weren't too many people that could help us. A woman called didnt was trying to become involved with speech therapy for kids. She also took on the opportunity of teaching deaf children how to speak. Originally, she didn't have the funds available to be able to assist us, so we became involved in fundraising for that campaign, and we started playing football matches where all of the funds went back to Dimity to create the centre, and she's moved on to 7 different locations. We keep going up one level at a time, understanding that the more money that they raise, the better the opportunities for the hearing impaired children. And they have an old church as their work base at the moment, but they're just about to upgrade once again, because the level of children that are being assisted by her organisation has grown from 4 to over 140,000. So there are a number of people which require plenty of assistance there. Epilepsy was something that I didn't know anything about whatsoever. When I was a young kid, probably wasn't interested in finding out about it either. It was of no concern to me. But obviously when I had to deal with it myself, it became a bit of an issue, a very important one. And after I had to deal with it, then had the surgery to remove a piece of the brain. I wanted to provide the best possible assistance I could to other kids that were dealing with epilepsy and their parents. One of the most important issues is when I'm reminding them that I can't tell them that the decision that they are making is the correct one or incorrect. I can advise them on what it's like from the patient side of things, but the most important thing is that they receive the best palliative care, and also assistance. All patients receive that same care, and assistance from the trained professionals. Each and every illness is very similar. You must receive the best possible advice, but I certainly do enjoy being involved with those parents. It was only yesterday that I had a family up at Channel 9 in Brisbane, and we meet probably 3 or 4 different families a week, where I bring them up to talk about their issues, what their problems are, the best possible way that I believe that they can continue their battle. But when it comes to decision making, I advise the parents once again that I can't tell them what the correct decision to make is. Their best advice is to go and talk to the doctors about it. I can talk from the patient side of things and tell them what it's like to do it, or why I made such a decision. But any final outcome is best decided upon by the patient, the parents, and also the medical staff.
That night you blacked out on the news cross must have been quite a shock. How has your life changed since then, and what have you learned about epilepsy since then?
It was a bit of a shock, but it was something that I knew that it was only a matter of time until it happened. It was basically a countdown. I'd almost, I'd had a seizure leading up to the news in the first commercial break, where I took 7 or 8 minutes to recover, and just made it before going on. And on one other occasion, I knew that I was extremely likely to have a seizure, and I asked one of my friends at Channel 9, Andrew Slack, would he mind reading the news. He knew all about it. I'd previously spoken to him and confessed to having a bit of a problem. But when it came about that night, I knew that it was something that I couldn't escape from. I went ahead to read the news, and all of a sudden, as it got closer, I heard the countdown start. I started to have the turn or the seizure, and at that stage it was very uncomfortable. I could feel my arm rattling. It was probably nerves just as much as anything else, but I knew that I was going to muck up, and I did so in front of a couple of million people, just to make sure that I had a big decision to eventually make. When that decision was made, I went ahead, visited Melbourne, just to speak to the best possible medical staff, and obviously that's the most important issue from that path, to get expert advice. I was asking questions about who the best person to see was, and the doctor that I spoke to said there is only one person that you can speak to in Australia about this if you're asked after the best there is. It's a bloke in Melbourne by the name of Professor Sam Berkovic. He has discovered more than half of the different forms of epilepsy. I only thought that there was 2 different forms of epilepsy, grand mal seizures and petit mal seizures, but apparently there was 57 different forms, and I've been dealing with epilepsy for well over 25 years, and I had no idea as to what the biggest problem was. So it was education, I believe, is probably one of the most important issues, and the understanding of the illness or the condition.
To thank you for your openness around these questions. I am currently studying to be a journalist myself, a bit like you. As journalists, we have to ask the questions and report on what the people want to know. The following questions are a selection from a number of my friends. I am not 100% responsible for them, but would like to ask them anyway. Would you like to proceed?
Proceed.
England has had more than one king. In your opinion, is Darren Lockyer worthy of such a title? And would you be willing to hand over your crown to him?
He's done very well for himself, Lockie. It's a bit of a dodgy issue that I get asked all the way along. Somebody said to me, who was the best footballer you've seen? Is it Darren Lockyer? And I've said to them, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I believe the best footballer that I've seen, including Darren Lockyer, is Alan Langer. He was a fantastic footballer. The bloke was a lot smaller than Darren Lockyer or I were, and he was playing at a particular time where I believe the standard of the game was at its highest in history. I believe that it's dropped off over the last 10 years in particular. It's not quite the game that it used to be, and while Lockie deserves plenty of credit for his performances on the football field, we can get a little bit carried away too quickly. But if I'm asked for the next, is he the best player that I've seen since my retirement? I've got to say that there's Andrew Johns, Brad Fittler, Alan Langer, and Darren Lockyer would fit in very well together. But the best bloke that I've seen from Queensland since my retirement is Alan Langer, first, Daylight second.
He should just be given the Prince title, in keeping with the King theme. Youngest have a pair of blue suede shoes. What is the strangest piece of clothing in your closet?
The strangest piece of clothing in my closet? I've got to say it's a nice dressing gown that was bought for me for my 30th birthday. I've never worn it, and I'm never likely to wear it. I regard it as being absolutely disgraceful. But the reason that I haven't worn it is because it's got this big tag, or it's a piece that's sewn on, and it's a King of Diamonds, and it was bought as a bit of a smart aleck gift by friends at a birthday party, just to have a go at me about the nickname the King. So it still sits there gathering dust, and probably will for the next 20 years.
Best player you have ever played against?
That's a pretty easy one, and despite there being quite a number of players that I played against, I'm often asked who was the best. I put it down to 4 players who were the best that I came up against in my era. Peter Sterling from Parramatta in Sydney, Brett Kenny, who was the best 5'8" that I ever played against, and he was from Parramatta in Sydney. Gene Miles, the bloke that I was unfortunate enough to room with in a lot of my tours when we went away, and Mal Meninga, who was an extremely good player. I then put a little bit of a division line in there and say, and from the years at the end of my career, I put it down to Alan Langer, so they'd be the 5 best. Peter Sterling, Brett Kenny, Gene Miles, Mal Meninga, and Alan Langer. If I'm asked about the best footballer I ever saw, it doesn't go with the rugby league circle. It was Mark Ella. He was an absolute freak. He was one of 11 Aboriginal children living in Sydney, who grew up to live his dream. He and his 2 brothers both represented Australia in rugby union, and his sister represented Australia in netball, so they were a pretty handy sporting family.
I was out the front before, and I saw your statue. Does it feel like having a twin? And in the colder months, does your body feel colder in some parts than others?
I've got to say it's extremely ugly. Probably not much different to me, actually. But it's, I'm not sure whether it is the original one, but it still sits there as a bit of a target for all of the pigeons that come past with their droppings on top of it. But it is, if anything, a little bit humbling, belittling experience at times, but I was just very lucky. I was at the right place at the right time and played in a pretty good team along the way, and I had plenty of great players that made life a little bit easier for me. But I'm also very fortunate that I was born into a sporting family. My dad was a former first grade player in Brisbane. He was later a first grade coach. And my mum was pretty handy at sport herself. She represented Queensland at netball for a number of years and then went away and had 5 kids. And came back and started playing netball again in her 30s and played for Queensland again. So I owe any success that I had to the breeding out Cannon Hill way. It was very fortunate. I was quite a lucky boy.
I said I'm not responsible for all of these questions. It is what the people want to hear. Moving right along. Your son is a good-looking guy. Is he single? And if he is there any way you could get me his phone number?
That's a question I've been asked many times before about his phone number, and every time it's been passed on, he rings me to abuse me and tell me that he's about to change his phone number again for the 494th time. So he's had to change it. He is still single. He's enjoying life. He's likely to be single for a long time. His mother and I don't think he'll ever get married. But he loves the life that he's in with the acting. He travels around the country and also around the world. He spent a period in America talking to some film studios over there, or just trying to open the door to gaining or furthering his career. But he just loves life, was always happy, and anything can happen.
I once came third in a Year 5 school race, and it felt pretty good. But I was wondering does it feel like to be a bloody legend and the best footy player of all time?
Fortune is a word that I use a hell of a lot. I'm lucky. Again, I was born at the right place at the right time. My dad always used to train me in the backyard, and I often say that the easiest way to say or to explain how fortunate I am was that when State of Origin started, Queensland got a side that started to win all the time, win consistently, and it became obvious that in 1984, when Queensland won for the 5th year in a row, that there was a real reason why Queensland were winning. We were asked why Queensland won, and the late great Senator Ron McAuliffe said, well, the bloke that's most responsible for Queensland's success on the football field is the big bloke upstairs. And when all of the journalists disagreed, he said, well, we haven't got a bad side here, and he went through to name the side. He said, fullback Colin Scott, the rest of the back line, Kerry Bowstead, Gene Miles, Mel Meninga, Chris Close, Wally Lewis, Mark Murray, the forward pack, Paul Horton, Wally Fulton-Smith, Brian Evelyn, Greg Dowling, Greg Kinescu and Dave Brown. Every one of those blokes was born within 18 months of each other. By the time we played senior grade football, we played a host of games against each other at junior football, and then a lot of first grade footy alongside each other at club level, and also representing Brisbane and Queensland. So we were quite fortunate that we were all born around the same time. Later on, of course, it was very similar when Alan Langer came into the Queensland side. You had Kevy Walters and Kerrod Walters, the whole pile of the blokes were all similar age. So if you're born around the same time, you understand each other off the field, it's extremely likely that you will understand each other on the field as well.
Finally, as a Queenslander, we hate cockroaches. What is the best way to kill them without leaving evidence behind?
I think the best way to get rid of cockroaches is just to keep beating them on the football field. There's no doubt about that. They seem to disappear. There's not so many New South Wales supporters around this year when Queensland had won the series. But if there's ever any doubt, just pull out the bagon to get rid of them inside the house. Outside, we'll do that on the football field.
Well, Wally, you survived my interview. Thank you so much for giving me some time today. This has been the first interview I have done, and your answers have been fantastic. Disability can affect anyone at any time, but our lives don't stop. People with disabilities have much to offer in all areas of life. Today you have given an insight into this, and it has been great talking to you. Thanks.
where indeed disability is a bit of a hurdle along the way, but it doesn't stop people from achieving what they want to in life. Congratulations and good luck.